What happens when visceral fat finally starts to break down? Science explained. The most dangerous fat on your body is the one you cannot grab. It hides deep in your abdomen, wrapped tightly around your vital organs. For years, it whispers to your hormones and blood vessels, never shouting. Then, one day, that hidden layer finally begins to shrink and release. So what really changes when that deep belly fat starts dissolving? To answer that, we need to look beneath the skin and mirrors. First, understand what this particular fat actually is and why it matters. Not all body fat behaves the same or carries the same risk. The soft layer you can pinch under your skin is subcutaneous fat. Visceral fat sits deeper, packed around intestines, liver, pancreas, and major vessels. Think of it like bubble wrap stuffed around your internal organs, stealing space. But instead of cushioning, it leaks chemicals that slowly push your body off balance. This hidden fat releases inflammatory molecules, stress hormones, and signals that disturb insulin. That combination is strongly associated with diabetes, heart disease, and fatty liver disease. So shrinking this particular fat is about survival, not just fitting smaller clothes. The body will not target visceral fat seriously until certain conditions are met. You usually need lower insulin, consistent energy deficit, and real metabolic demand from movement. When those signals line up, your physiology gives a quiet green light inside. Deep abdominal fat cells receive that message faster than many surface fat cells. They are near large veins, so hormones and nerves access them very quickly. The first change is microscopic but intense inside each shrinking visceral fat cell. Stored triglycerides are broken apart into glycerol and fatty acids for release. These fatty acids spill into nearby blood vessels and begin circulating throughout your body. That release is the first real evidence that hidden fat is unlocking. Your muscles notice those molecules arriving between meals or during light activity. They start increasing enzymes that burn fat instead of relying only on glucose. Your heart also senses the change and leans more on fatty acids for fuel. Meanwhile, your pancreas begins needing less insulin to manage the same food intake. Insulin levels drift downward across the day, especially between your usual eating windows. Lower insulin removes a major brake on fat burning, particularly inside the abdomen. You might not notice anything dramatic yet, aside from slightly steadier hunger patterns. But under the surface, the direction of your metabolism has already changed. The next organ heavily affected by shrinking visceral fat is your liver. Blood-draining visceral fat travels straight into the liver through special veins. So, when deep belly fat releases stored energy, the liver receives the first wave. Imagine a factory suddenly getting more deliveries every hour than it did before. At first, the liver can feel overloaded, especially if already fatty or inflamed. If changes stay consistent, the liver responds by upgrading its fat processing machinery. Enzymes that burn fat become more active, and internal fat droplets slowly shrink. Over weeks, laboratory markers of liver stress may improve, especially with better diet. As the liver works more efficiently, blood sugar and cholesterol handling also become smoother. At the same time, something else important begins happening with inflammation signals. Visceral fat constantly releases inflammatory cytokines, keeping your immune system slightly triggered. These signals irritate blood vessel walls and interfere with insulin and brain communication. As visceral fat cells shrink, they release fewer inflammatory messages into circulation. Your immune system can finally step down from constant, low-grade alert mode. Blood vessels relax more easily, and tissues receive oxygen and nutrients with less resistance. This reduction in chronic inflammation is strongly associated with lower long-term disease risk. However, visceral fat has not only stored energy but also stored some unwanted compounds. Over years, pollutants, leftover chemicals, and metabolic byproducts can accumulate inside fat cells. When those cells shrink, part of that stored material re-enters your bloodstream again. Your liver, kidneys, and lymphatic system must then process and eliminate these substances. Some people feel temporary fatigue, headaches, or mood changes during intense fat loss phases. For most healthy individuals, this reflects adjustment, not dangerous poisoning or organ failure. Hydration, movement, and sleep can support these filtering systems while they catch up. As visceral fat continues shrinking, fewer stored pollutants remain to re-enter circulation later. Your internal environment grows quieter, less inflamed, and more chemically stable over time. Another major benefit of losing visceral fat is improved metabolic flexibility. Metabolic flexibility means you can switch between burning carbohydrates and fats smoothly. With high visceral fat, your body often stays stuck on glucose dependence. You feel exhausted quickly when meals are delayed or carbohydrates are slightly reduced. After visceral fat decreases, your body accesses stored fat more willingly between meals. Energy feels steadier, and you experience fewer extreme crashes or desperate sugar cravings. At the cellular level, mitochondria adapt to this new fuel mix over time. They increase enzymes for fat oxidation and reduce production of damaging free radicals. This change has been shown to support healthier aging and lower oxidative stress. Now, something interesting happens with the fat just under your skin. Visceral fat previously disrupted hormones controlling appetite storage and fat release everywhere. It worsened insulin resistance and confused leptin, the hormone that signals long-term fullness. It also blunted adrenaline and growth hormone effects that help mobilize stored fat. When visceral fat shrinks, this hormonal interference starts reducing across your entire body. Subcutaneous fat cells become more responsive to natural fat-burning signals again. Areas once labeled stubborn may finally respond better to movement and nutrition changes. Weight loss begins feeling less like constant punishment and more like cooperative biology. Another area deeply influenced by visceral fat is your brain and mood. Inflammatory molecules from visceral stores can alter neurotransmitters and stress responses. They are associated with brain fog, low motivation, and difficulty concentrating. Chronically unstable blood sugar from insulin resistance further stresses your nervous system daily. When visceral fat decreases, inflammation and glucose swings both usually calm down. Your brain receives fuel more steadily and fewer inflammatory surprises in its blood supply. Many people report clearer thinking, better focus, and more stable emotional reactions. That improved mental clarity often feeds back into better lifestyle decisions each day. Better choices then support further visceral fat loss, creating an upward reinforcing spiral. Meanwhile, your gut is quietly rebuilding its internal ecosystem in response to less inflammation. Visceral fat and chronic stress hormones had previously weakened the gut barrier. That weakness allowed more irritants and bacterial fragments to slip into circulation. As inflammation falls, that barrier can repair and mucus layers thicken again. Beneficial bacteria find a calmer environment and start taking back lost territory. They produce vitamins, short-chain fats, and signaling molecules that support immune balance. Some of these molecules even influence serotonin and other mood-related brain chemicals. So, losing visceral fat can indirectly support calmer digestion and better emotional resilience. Perhaps the most important part of shrinking visceral fat is reducing disease risk. Visceral fat is strongly associated with type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. As it decreases, insulin sensitivity usually improves, and fasting sugar levels may drop. Your pancreas experiences less pressure to overproduce insulin every time you eat. Blood pressure may also improve when inflammation falls, and blood vessels relax more. Cholesterol particles can shift toward a pattern considered less harmful in many studies. Altogether, these changes are associated with lower risk of heart attacks and strokes. Of course, visceral fat loss alone does not guarantee perfect protection or outcomes. Genetics, age, medications, and environment still shape your overall health trajectory. But reducing this deep fat removes a powerful driver of many chronic conditions. Hormones that once misfired under visceral fat now begin working more cooperatively. Adiponectin levels usually rise, supporting better fat burning and improved insulin response. Leptin signaling, which controls long-term energy balance, becomes easier for your brain. Your brain can finally sense stored energy more accurately and allow normal hunger patterns. Ghrelin, the hormone that increases appetite, shows more predictable rises and falls. This makes it easier to distinguish true hunger from emotional or habitual eating. With less visceral fat, your body can invest more energy into cellular repair. Autophagy, the process of recycling damaged components, can operate under less interference. Muscles recover more effectively after training, and joints may feel less inflamed. Organs like the heart, pancreas, and kidneys experience fewer inflammatory insults each day. Skin, sleep, and digestion can also improve as overall internal stress decreases. Eventually, your body reaches a new equilibrium with much less visceral fat. Metabolic flexibility becomes normal, not something fragile that breaks after one indulgent weekend. Hormones communicate more clearly, and appetite feels more predictable and less chaotic. You become more resistant to quickly regaining large amounts of deep abdominal fat. That doesn't mean you are invincible, but your baseline risk is lower. Most importantly, you now understand what this hidden fat was doing all along. You also understand what happens when it finally starts to disappear. That knowledge is more valuable than any single number on a scale. It helps you choose habits that maintain low visceral fat for life. Remember, no diet or workout can target visceral fat perfectly on demand. Your body decides what to burn based on hormones, sleep, stress, and patterns. But steady nutrition, consistent movement, and better recovery all encourage your body's choice. They make it easier for your physiology to say yes to deep fat stores. If you have significant medical conditions, always include a professional in these decisions. Medications, heart disease, or diabetes can change how safely your body handles fat loss. Think of visceral fat loss as one powerful lever, not the whole machine. You still need sleep, connection, purpose, and daily movement to stay well. Still, watching visceral fat shrink is one of the most meaningful changes. You are not just chasing smaller clothes, you are changing future medical charts. Blood tests, imaging, and how you feel all begin telling a different story. A story where your organs breathe easier without that suffocating internal padding. A story where your brain thinks clearly without constant inflammatory noise underneath. A story where your heart pushes blood through calmer, less irritated vessels every day. When hidden visceral fat finally melts, your body is not simply smaller. It becomes more coordinated, more flexible, and more resilient from the inside. If this helped you understand visceral fat, consider liking, subscribing, and sharing. And always choose sustainable changes so your body can keep feeling freer.